Rain-soaked beginnings. The rain hammered against the windows of enchanted pages, the rhythmic sound nearly drowning out the soft jazz playing in the background. Eliza Morgan wiped down the counter of her bookstore cafe for the third time that hour, resigned to another slow evening. October in Willowbrook always brought the most relentless downpours, keeping most of the small town's residents tucked away in their homes. At least it gives me time to finish cataloging the new arrivals, she murmured to herself, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. The bell above the door chimed unexpectedly, pulling her attention away from the stack of novels. A man stood in the doorway, his dark coat soaked through, water dripping onto the welcome mat. He looked disoriented, as though he hadn't intended to step inside at all. "Goodness, you're drenched," Eliza said, immediately reaching for a clean towel behind the counter. "Please come in properly before you catch your death." The stranger hesitated, glancing back at the sheets of rain outside. "I didn't mean to intrude. My car broke down about a mile back and my phone's dead." Then it settled. "You're exactly where you need to be." Eliza gestured toward a cozy armchair near the fireplace. "Sit. I'll make you some tea." As the man reluctantly settled into the chair, Eliza noticed his expensive watch, incongruous with his otherwise casual attire. He quickly covered it when he caught her looking. "I'm Julian," he offered simply, accepting the steaming mug she brought over moments later. "Eliza Morgan. This is my little corner of the world," she smiled, sitting across from him. "Not many strangers find their way to Willowbrook." Julian's shoulders visibly relaxed as he took a sip. "I needed to get away for a while, clear my head." What Eliza couldn't know was that Julian Reed had, until 3 days ago, been overseeing a corporate empire worth billions from his penthouse in Manhattan. The same empire his father had built and his sister had nearly destroyed through embezzlement. The betrayal had been crushing, especially when he discovered how many of his so-called friends had known and said nothing. "Sometimes distance provides clarity," Eliza said, interrupting his thoughts. "Are you passing through or staying a while?" Julian looked around at the shelves lined with books, breathing in the scent of paper, cinnamon, and possibility. For the first time in months, he felt his chest loosen. "I hadn't decided," he admitted, "but I think I might stay, at least until I figure some things out." Eliza nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd come to Willowbrook 5 years ago after her divorce, using her settlement to buy this struggling bookstore and transform it into a haven. She recognized the look of someone seeking sanctuary. "Well, the Willowbrook Inn is just 2 blocks down. Tell Harriet I sent you. She'll give you the room with the writing desk. It has the best view of the mountains when the rain clears." By the time the downpour slowed to a drizzle, they'd discussed everything from 19th century literature to the merits of sourdough bread. Julian helped her reshelve a cart of returns before leaving. His clothes still damp, but his spirit noticeably lighter. Neither of them could have predicted that this rain-soaked encounter would alter the course of both their lives, setting in motion a story neither wealth nor words alone could write. Pages between us. The morning light streamed through the windows of enchanted pages, catching the dust motes dancing between bookshelves. Eliza hummed as she arranged a display of local authors, periodically glancing at the door. It had been 3 days since the rain-soaked stranger had taken refuge in her shop, and each morning since Julian had appeared precisely at 9, ordering a black coffee and settling into what she now thought of as his armchair. Today was no different. The bell chimed and Julian entered, carrying a small paper bag. "Morning," he said with a smile that transformed his serious face. "I brought muffins from that bakery you mentioned." "Violets?" "You didn't have to do that," Eliza said, though she accepted the bag eagerly. "Consider it rent for occupying your best reading spot." Julian shrugged off his jacket, revealing a simple gray Henley that nonetheless looked expensive in the way only quality clothing could. "Besides, I need to earn my keep somehow. Over the next 2 weeks, Julian became a fixture at Enchanted Pages. He helped reorganize the classics section, fixed the perpetually leaking sink in the bathroom, and even attended the Tuesday night book club, offering insights that impressed even Mrs. Calloway, the retired English teacher who'd once called Hemingway overrated to the author's grandson's face. What no one in Willowbrook knew was that Julian's executive assistant, Thomas, was growing increasingly frantic with each passing day. The Wall Street Journal had run a piece speculating about Julian Reed's mysterious absence, and board members were threatening to call an emergency meeting. Julian dealt with these concerns in brief, encrypted emails sent from the inn's business center, always returning to the bookstore as quickly as possible. "You've never told me what you do," Eliza remarked one evening as they closed up the shop together. "For work, I mean." Julian's hands stilled on the book he was reshelving. "I'm in finance." "That explains the watch," she teased, then grew more serious. "You don't have to tell me. We all have parts of ourselves we keep private." Julian studied her face, the constellation of freckles across her nose, the slight crinkle at the corners of her eyes when she smiled. In just a few weeks, she'd become the person he most looked forward to seeing each day. "My life before coming here was complicated," he admitted. "Full of people who wanted things from me?" Eliza nodded, understanding. "And here?" "Here I'm just Julian, the guy who can't make decent coffee but knows his way around a leaky pipe." He smiled. "It's refreshing." One rainy afternoon, the bookstore remained empty except for the two of them. Eliza introduced Julian to her tradition of reading aloud during downpours. Her voice, melodic and expressive, brought to life passages from Pride and Prejudice while rain pattered against the windows. "You know," Julian said when she paused, "I haven't felt this peaceful in years." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with possibility. Eliza felt her heart quicken as Julian leaned slightly toward her, his gaze dropping to her lips. The spell broke when Mrs. Calloway rapped on the window, umbrella in hand, ready for her special order mystery novel. Eliza jumped up, flustered, while Julian cleared his throat and reached for another book. Later that night, as Julian walked Eliza home through the quiet streets of Willowbrook, their hands brushed accidentally. The second time, Eliza gently linked her pinky with his. By the time they reached her cottage, their fingers were fully intertwined. "Would you like to come in for tea?" she asked, her voice soft in the darkness. Julian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather light. "I would. But I think we both need a little time to consider what's happening between us." Eliza nodded, both disappointed and impressed by his restraint. "Tomorrow, then?" "Tomorrow," he promised, then leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Sweet dreams, Eliza Morgan." As Julian walked back to the inn, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Thomas. "Reynolds is in Willowbrook. Says he needs to speak with you immediately. Critical situation with the Singapore merger." Julian froze, staring at the screen. His carefully constructed sanctuary was about to collapse, and with it, possibly his chance with the woman who'd begun to heal parts of him he hadn't known were broken. Whispers of truth. The Willowbrook Inn's reception area was not designed for confrontations between corporate titans. Yet there sat Harrison Reynolds, Julian's chief financial officer, his tailored suit and polished Oxfords absurdly out of place among the homey quilts and landscape paintings. 3 weeks, Julian. The board is in panic mode, investors are getting skittish, and you're, what, playing small-town tourist? Harrison ran a hand through his silver hair. Your sister's legal team is making moves. We need you back in New York. Julian paced the small room. Olivia nearly destroyed everything my father built. She stole from our own company, Harrison, and half our executive team knew about it. Which is precisely why you can't hide out here making googly eyes at the local shopkeeper. Harrison's voice rose before he caught himself. I've been running interference, but you need to make a decision. Either come back and fight, or prepare to lose everything. Julian's mind flashed to Eliza. Her gentle strength, her genuine kindness. The way she saw him as a person, not a portfolio. Give me 3 more days, Julian finally said. I'll handle the Singapore situation remotely, but I need time to resolve things here. Harrison left with reluctant agreement. But not before being spotted by Willowbrook's most notorious gossip, Bernadette Willis, who immediately noted the expensive car and Harrison's mention of Mr. Reed as he departed. Meanwhile, Eliza was rearranging her store's event space for an author signing when Julian arrived, his expression troubled. Everything okay? she asked, setting down a stack of chairs. Julian took one of the chairs and helped her arrange them in rows. Just some work complications catching up with me. Serious complications? Eliza studied his face. Nothing I can't handle, he assured her, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. That evening, they walked to the Willowbrook Fall Festival together. The town square had been transformed with twinkling lights, vendors selling apple cider and local artists displaying their work. For a few magical hours, Julian forgot about Harrison's visit and the looming crisis at Reed Enterprises. They stopped at a jewelry stand where an elderly craftsman was selling handmade pieces. A simple silver pendant with a small blue stone caught Eliza's eye. "It's beautiful," she murmured, admiring but replacing it on the display. Later, while Eliza chatted with a former student, Julian slipped back and purchased the pendant. When he returned, Bernadette Willis was hovering near Eliza, her eyes gleaming with the excitement of fresh gossip. "Eliza, dear, did you know you've been hosting quite the celebrity in your little shop?" Bernadette's voice carried, drawing attention from nearby festival-goers. "That gentleman friend of yours arrived with Harrison Reynolds today. Yes, the Harrison Reynolds of Reed Enterprises." Eliza looked confused. "I think you're mistaken." "Julian works in finance, but Julian Reed," Bernadette emphasized, clearly delighted to be the bearer of such news. "The CEO of Reed Enterprises. Worth billions, according to my nephew who works in investment banking. He's been all over the financial news, apparently disappeared without a trace weeks ago." Eliza turned to find Julian standing behind her, the pendant clutched in his hand, his face a mask of regret as whispers rippled through the gathering crowd. "Eliza," he started, reaching for her hand, but she stepped back, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "Is it true?" The festival lights suddenly seemed too bright, the crowd too close. Julian could only nod, watching as understanding dawned on Eliza's face, followed by something that cut him far deeper than anger would have: disappointment. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Julian standing alone amid curious stares and excited murmurs, the silver pendant still clutched in his hand. The storm breaks rain returned to Willowbrook the day after the festival, as though the weather itself sympathized with Eliza's mood. She moved mechanically through her morning routine at Enchanted Pages, jumping at every chime of the bell, both dreading and hoping that Julian would appear. He didn't. By afternoon, the town was buzzing with speculation. Several customers came in solely to ask about her billionaire, each question piercing Eliza like a tiny dart. She closed early, hanging a family emergency sign on the door. Back in her cottage, she searched Julian Reed online, something she'd never thought to do before. Articles about his business acumen, his philanthropic foundation, his brief engagement to a French fashion designer. 3 years ago, all pieces of a life that seemed worlds away from the man who had helped her alphabetize. Mystery novels and laughed at her terrible jokes. A soft knock at her door startled her from her research. Through the peephole, she saw Julian standing in the rain without an umbrella, much like the night they'd first met. She opened the door but blocked the entrance. "I think you've said everything you needed to by not saying anything at all." "Eliza, please." Julian's voice was rough with emotion. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Reluctantly, she stepped aside. Julian entered, water dripping onto her welcome mat, an echo of their first meeting that wasn't lost on either of them. "I should have told you," he began. "I came to Willowbrook after discovering my sister had been embezzling from our company for years. People I trusted, friends, colleagues, knew and said nothing. I needed escape, anonymity. I understand needing space," Eliza said carefully. "What I don't understand is the deception. Weeks, Julian. For weeks you let me believe you were someone else." "I never lied about who I am," he insisted. "My name is Julian Reed. I do work in finance." "Everything between us, every conversation, every moment, that was real." "But incomplete," Eliza countered. "You let me believe you were just passing through, figuring things out. All while running a multinational corporation from your hotel room?" Julian ran a hand through his damp hair. "I was going to tell you. The longer I waited, the harder it became. With you, for the first time in my life, someone saw me. Not my wealth, not my family name, just me. I was afraid to lose that. And instead you lost my trust. Eliza's voice broke slightly. Harrison came because there's a situation I need to handle in person. I have to return to New York tomorrow. Julian pulled out the silver pendant, placing it on her coffee table. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now, but I am asking you to believe that what we shared was real, the realest thing in my life. Eliza stared at the pendant, emotions warring within her. I need time, Julian. I understand. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, these weeks in Willowbrook, with you, made me realize what's been missing from my life. Not just escape or anonymity, but authenticity, connection. After he left, Eliza sat alone in her cottage, the pendant untouched on the table, rain drumming against the roof as tears finally came. Not for the loss of a billionaire from her life, but for the man who had fixed her leaky sink and read poetry by her fireplace. In New York, Julian dove back into crisis management, his mind never fully leaving a small bookstore cafe in Willowbrook. He directed his legal team to prosecute his sister while restructuring the company leadership, removing everyone who had known about the embezzlement. He worked 18-hour days, sleeping on the couch in his office, the memory of Eliza's disappointed face driving him to fix what was broken, both in his company and, he hoped, eventually between them. 3 weeks passed without contact. Then, on a particularly difficult day when the board was questioning his restructuring decisions, Julian's assistant delivered a small package that had arrived by courier. Inside was a book, a first edition of Jane Eyre, with a pressed wildflower marking a passage. I have for the first time found what I can truly love. I have found you. Beyond wealth and words, the small private airport outside Willowbrook rarely saw aircraft larger than single-engine Cessnas, so the sleek corporate jet that touched down one crisp November morning drew curious stares. Julian Reed emerged, carrying only a weekend bag and looking nothing like the billionaire CEO the financial press had been reporting on. The ruthless corporate reformer who had exposed an embezzlement scheme, restructured his entire executive team, and then, most shockingly, announced a sabbatical to work on projects of personal significance. The town car he'd arranged took him directly to Enchanted Pages. The bell chimed as he entered, heart pounding as though he were 20 again, not a 38-year-old man who regularly negotiated billion-dollar deals. Eliza was helping a young girl find books about horses, her hair pulled back in a loose braid, reading glasses perched on her nose. When she looked up and saw Julian, she froze momentarily before finishing with her customer. You got my message, she said when they were finally alone, her fingers nervously adjusting books on a nearby display. I did. Julian stepped closer, though I wasn't entirely sure what it meant. Jane Eyre has some pretty complicated relationships. A small smile tugged at Eliza's lips. I've had time to think about us, about why your omission hurt so much. Julian waited, giving her space to continue. It wasn't about the money, she finally said. It was about feeling like I'd opened my life to someone who wasn't fully opening theirs in return. I know, Julian acknowledged. And you deserve better. But then I remembered something, Eliza continued, moving toward him. That first night in the rain, you told me you needed to clear your head. You never pretended to be someone you weren't. You just didn't tell me everything. And honestly, neither did I. Julian raised an eyebrow, and Eliza laughed softly. I didn't mention that my ex-husband left me for his secretary in such a public way that I had to move to a new town to escape the gossip, or that the settlement money that bought this store came with stipulations that I'm still navigating. We all have complicated histories, Julian. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the silver pendant he had left. I've been wearing this every day. Hope surged through Julian as he reached for her hands. I've restructured my entire life these past weeks. Promoted Thomas to COO, established a foundation to support independent bookstores, and set up systems so I can work remotely 3 weeks each month. Eliza's eyes widened. You did all that for us, Julian confirmed. If there still is an us to consider. For answer, Eliza rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with weeks of longing and newfound honesty. When they finally parted, Eliza laughed. "Mrs. Calloway will be insufferable about this. She's been defending you to the whole town, insisting you were a gentleman in difficult circumstances." "Smart woman," Julian murmured against Eliza's hair. "I should stock her mystery section with first editions." Later that evening, as they sat by the fireplace in enchanted pages after closing, Julian in his usual armchair, Eliza curled up beside him, he showed her the plans for the reading room he was funding for the local school, careful to emphasize that he wanted her input on the design. "You know," Eliza mused, "when I offered you shelter from the rain that night, I never imagined where it would lead." Julian touched the pendant at her throat, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a simple act of kindness. Outside, rain began to fall again, drumming against the windows of the bookstore. But inside, surrounded by stories of other people's lives and loves, Eliza and Julian were writing the opening chapters of their own, a tale not about a billionaire and a bookshop owner, but about two people who found in each other something wealth couldn't buy, and words could only begin to describe. In the months that followed, Julian would divide his time between New York and Willowbrook, eventually renovating the apartment above Enchanted Pages. The town gradually accepted him not as Julian Reed, billionaire CEO, but simply as Eliza's Julian, the man who knew how to fix leaky pipes and could recite Keats from memory. And Eliza would sometimes visit New York, attending charity galas on Julian's arm, always wearing her simple silver pendant among the diamonds and pearls of high society, a reminder that sometimes the greatest treasures are found not in penthouses, but in rain-soaked bookstores where two souls seeking shelter discover they've been searching for each other all along.